Hey there, this is Behind Closed Doors, and today we're painting one of the most iconic fantasy creatures of all time, the Humble Skeleton. Starting off with a dry brush of XV88 on the whole model over a black undercoat, and there's a couple of different browns you could use for this, like for example Balor Brown. You just want a nice mid-range brown to act as a base for the upcoming bone dry brush. I use XV88 because I like its tone. I use it for everything I would have used the old snakebite leather for. It's got a bit of a yellowy tinge to it as well, which works well with the bone. Now we're going to go over everything again with an Ushabti bone dry brush. Not quite as heavy here. You know, you don't want to be filling in any detail. Less is more with dry brushing. You can always add more on, but a little bit tricky to take it off. And you know, you don't have to worry about getting paint on the non-bone parts. We're going to be repainting all that later. And one of the keys to painting skeletons is definitely speed. These guys rarely hang out in small groups, I tell you. So this model is actually from Warhammer Underworlds, and he may be the most dynamic skeleton I've ever seen. Look at that pose. I never realized skeletons could move that way before I saw this model, and you know what? I'm glad with my newfound knowledge. And he's done. This skeleton, he's ready to join his gang. Just kidding, but skeletons have such nice details, they already look good with just a dry brush. So we're going to paint some details now with Caliban green, and you can use whatever army colours you like for things like this loincloth. The simplest thing would be to go for a, you know, like a black or a grey, perfectly acceptable colours for a skeleton. I'm using a darkish green here because it works nicely with bone as a colour contrast. So we went a bit crazy before when dry brushing, but now when you're doing the details you want to bring it in a bit, be a bit neater so you don't have to do too many touch-ups on the dry brush bone later because that's a bit of a pain. Pop a bit of green on his shield there as well. I actually made a mistake and painted some of his belt that's trailing off green during this stage, but I'll fix that later when I'm painting the leather. That's why it's good to always try and paint with a kind of an inside-out method, so you can just fix up your mistakes as you go along. It's no biggie. Next up, we're painting all the straps, wood, and other details with Rhinox hide. When you're painting large groups, particularly for an army project, it's good to keep a more limited colour palette. I like a 4-colour system, so 2 nice contrasting colours, and then a neutral like a dark brown or a black to break them up, and then a metallic for the other details. I'm also going to fix up that belt I painted green at this stage. Now then, the metal bits. We're going for a dull, kind of rusted feel here with all the metal, as would be befitting for a decaying skeleton warrior. And Citadel has a range of cool technical paints for adding effects like rust and corrosion, but I'm going to show you a simple method to achieve an old effect, just using a 50-50 mix of Iron Warriors and Rhinox hide. And you want this mix to look brown, but still have some of that metallic glimmer to it, so adjust your preference for how grungy you want it when you're mixing it up. Any dark silver can be used for this, really. I like Iron Warriors because it's really dark. It's got really good coverage. I think it's just a great color, and it's a great base for any kind of metal that you're using. You can use this as well as a base to try some of those technical paints too, you know, if you want to do some experimentation down that road. I like to keep my bases fairly simple. And this model actually came with a pre-sculpted base, as you can see, so I'm going to take this opportunity to give it a heavy dry brush of Skavenblight Dinge. And this is a great colour for terrain, and a whole host of other things, because it's a dark grey, but it's got a little bit of a brown to it. So do a few coats if you need to, and make this a solid heavy base. Next up, Nuln Oil over the whole model. Dip this bad boy. Well, not that far, but maybe you want to do 2 coats of this, as Nuln Oil can be a little thin, or you can maybe mix a bit of something like Abaddon Black with it, just give it a bit of a stronger black depending on what you want overall. And this is one of my main tools as a painter, hitting the whole model with a unifying wash, and I think Nuln Oil is the most flexible for this purpose. The wash is going to tie in all the colours of your model together, and it's also going to provide the first level of shading for all the colours. And Additionally, for something like this, it's also going to blend in all the dry brushing some more, because dry brushing can look a little messy sometimes. All around, just bloody great stuff, Nuln Oil, I reckon. It's the best. Make sure it's not pooling anywhere with your brush though, and don't forget to hit the whole model, including the base. Now the wash is dry, we're going to go back to the Ushabti bone, painting on some highlights, and really make sure your wash is all dry here, otherwise you're going to get some ugly smears. This bone is also going to further neaten up the dry brushing, and it's just going to bring that bone color back a bit more. The Nuln Oil is great for shading, but it kind of brings down the saturation and all the colors, so it's going to bring it back a little bit. But we're going to leave it in all the shadows and let it do its work. This stage can be time consuming, and it's easy to get lost in it, so adjust this depending on how many skellies you need to paint. The main areas you want to pay attention to are focal points like the head and the hands, the rib cage, the top of the shoulders. You can also decide how dirty and grungy you want your skeletons to look with the amount of bone you paint on at this stage. So, you might want some grimdark vampire count style skeletons. Or maybe you're doing some bright and bleached Tomb King style dudes. It's going to be up to you. So once you're happy with that, we're going to just do some final highlights with pure white. And you can use any brand white for this, it doesn't matter. We just want a pure white. I actually quite like the Vallejo one, game color, just because I think it's got a better consistency. Some of the Games Workshop ones can be a bit chunky sometimes. But either way, grab your white and just keep these to the key points, like the facial detail, the shoulders and the hands, the little fingers. The more highlighting you do here, the brighter your skeleton will be overall, so a lot of this now is just personal choice. If you find a pure white to be a little bright, mix a little bone with it to make it a bit more subtle. Back to the base for a bit of a break. Just a light dry brush of Dawnstone here to pick out some more of the sculpted detail. If you accidentally hit the feet a bit, it doesn't matter. It will just look like dirt, it's fine. I like to keep the overall base quite dark on models like this, just to create a nice contrast and also not to draw the eye away from the mini. I'm going to give a little highlight to the leather and wood bits now with a mix of Rhinox hide and Ushabti bone. And for secondary colours on the model like this brown, one highlight is probably enough, especially for, battle ready kind of models. If your mix looks too bright, just dial it back with some more brown. And bone's a good colour to mix with brown for this. It just gives a bit of a faded look, which is very appropriate for the undead. If you want to go further with these highlights, you can mix more bone in there. Again, this is optional, particularly if you're just going for a tabletop standard, but I'm just doing some real stark ones here. So one of the last things we have to do is finish his raggedy skeleton loincloth. And starting with Caliban green again, and remembering to leave the Nuln Oil washed green in the shadows, just like we did with the other colours to create a nice shade. I'm just mixing some highlights straight up here with a bit of white, and you could alternatively use something like Warpstone Glow for this purpose, but I still like to do mixes from time to time. Mixing paints to find the colour you want is just a really good skill to always keep practicing. And white can sometimes make stuff look a little bit faded if you go too crazy with the highlight mixes, just because, well, it's white. But I think that works well for things like skeletons, or any other kind of undead for that matter. The final highlight here, it's nice and stark, just really sell that faded old look of the cloth. And this kind of stark highlight also works really well with things like the shield, when you're adding scratches and whatnot. So this is a great time to talk about glazes. After a little break, and staring at the model, which is something you should always do, always take a little breather, sit back, think about the direction the model's heading in. I reckon the final green highlights are slightly too bright, so I'm going to tone them down a little bit. And glazing is another important tool in your painter's kit. It works in a similar way to washes in that it can both bring down the brightness of your highlights while also blending them together. And this twofold effect is what lessens the harshness. Now, the glaze here is Caliban green, mixed with a little Lahmian medium, and you can use any medium you want. It doesn't have to be medium from the Lands of the Dead, just to take the edge off. You want this super thin too, so thin that you barely notice the difference. And then you can then apply multiple glaze coats until you're happy. You really don't want to be messing up your highlights here with any kind of thick paint. That's not what you want this late in the painting journey. And the Citadel contrast range is also a great resource for glazes, and they already come pre-mixed, so it's handy. But even with contrast paints, you still want to thin further on your palette to get that true glaze consistency. They just make the whole process a bit easier, which is always good. If you want, hit just the very sharpest edges with a little Ironbreaker. This will also contrast with the brown metal on the other areas and just, further strengthen that old look. As a finishing touch, a super light dry brush to pick out any of the most raised bits of detail on the base. And a bit of black around the edge, as is tradition. The skeleton is complete. Sometimes the simplest of models can be the most compelling, and I think that's definitely the case with skeletons. I hope you enjoyed the video today. I've actually got a new filming setup and I'm going to be making a lot more videos, and I'm really excited that I'm going to be able to share that with you. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and keep an eye out for all the upcoming stuff, and we'll see you next time on Behind Closed Doors.